Welcome CSC230, Website Design and Development, to ex2, Lists and Links CSS. Now we're still going to call it ex1 in our heading here, but this will be ex2 because we'll be adding the CSS. And this is kind of a finished product. It may not look exactly like this. I'm going to kind of do it from scratch, so I'll try to get as close as I can to something like this, to this sample. And you can see I used colors that are in the picture here, this header image, and I pulled some greens out of there. I pulled a blue from the bottom to kind of balance off with the blue sky, and used some kind of natural earthy kind of colors in the middle. A little darker on the background, a little lighter here in kind of the main body area or our section area. And also take note that this thing centers within the page. If it gets too small, it gets covered up, but if it's on a large screen, it stays in the middle of the page. And it doesn't mean we're always going to lay out web pages like that, but we're going to try this out and explore some CSS, just some little bits here and there, not a whole lot, just some margins, some fonts, some spacing, some alignment, some things like that we're going to work with. So this will kind of be the finished product. Now, just so you understand what's happening if we didn't have CSS, here's the styles.css file that we're going to make. Now, we're even going to do a reset. That's from the book, our online book. They have a reset in there. We could copy and paste it and modify it a little bit. But as far as what we put in here, we're just going to have a couple selectors: HTML, body, section, H1, H2, the lists, ordered list, unordered list, and then we'll pick out a couple things just to modify it slightly. But if you didn't have this file, or for whatever reason, if you went to your index file, now the index file is basically pointing to the CSS file. So if you just, even if I did this, if I just called it style.css, which doesn't exist, I can save it, and then when I go back to this page and I refresh it, it's just going to go back to the generic HTML that we had, and even to the point where I took out this width of 800 pixels here. We're going to put that back, but we're going to put it in the CSS file. But this is the default of everything HTML. This is generic HTML here, and it has big bold headings, it has space in between paragraphs, all that kind of stuff there. It has indented bullet lists, all that kind of stuff. There's even a little margin on the page, maybe 4 to 6 pixels. I forget exactly if it's 6 or 4, but something like that around the edge. So resets will get rid of all of that, so you're not kind of mixing some of your custom stuff with some of that. But that's the way it's going to look when we start from your first exercise that you worked on, and then we're going to make it look like this. And again, I just have to put the S there and save it, the index file, and then just refresh this, and then it should link up again and do something like this. So this is what we're going to try to do. Just do something like this. It'll probably take a couple videos to do, so I imagine this will be part 1. So I'm going to get started right from scratch, so let me do that in a second. Okay, here I am back to my GourmIDE dashboard, and I'm going to start my container. So I'm going to hit the run button. So you should have ex1 done. So that's the HTML CSS one. You should have that done already. All right, so here's my container. And remember, if you ever get a spinning wheel here, just refresh it. And what we should have here is your ex1. And you should have your fall header and your index page. That's all you should have. I'm going to open up my index page because we may work on that. Well, a little bit. I'm going to make my text a little bigger here. So I'm going to do Command plus. On a Mac, if you're on Windows, you could do Control plus just to make this text a little bit bigger. And remember, we did use some CSS inside here. That was inline CSS that we did in here, which we're not going to use very often unless you have to. Like if you're working in My Warren in the discussion post or something and you need any CSS, that's the only way you can do it. But in here, we're going to use a separate CSS file, Cascading Style Sheets, and make sure you read about CSS from your first 3 chapters. The first 2 chapters you should have already read, and then getting to know CSS. And you don't have to memorize everything, but just start to work your way through it and get familiar with CSS. That'll be a nice reference to use. And then also the W3 schools as well. I have a couple other pages open that I'll mention. I have the color picker so that when we go to look for colors, I could just mix something up here to get a hex color or whatever I need to use, so I can kind of find something visually to put in there so I don't have to guess. Okay, so coming back to here, I'm going to take a look at it, and I'll just hit my preview, and it'll open up in a new tab. And remember, when you click on your main container, you should have that link here that'll go to your home page, and this is what it looked like. And now you can see it has that width there of 800 pixels, which we're going to take out. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is remove that. I'm going to remove this so it's just section, and we can put that section style in the CSS file when we create it. So I'm just going to remove that. I'll save this. and we won't have any CSS in our HTML. It'll all be structure and content. That's what it should be. Now, if I come here and refresh it, now it's long again, and we'll fix that. So now we're going to start some CSS. So we need a CSS file to work with. We're going to link to an external CSS file. It'll be in the same directory, so it'll know where to find it, but it's external. It's not inside the page. So we're going to click on ex1 here, your directory, and go to the plus sign and make a new file. And I'm going to call it styles. I know there's sample that you call it style. I always like to call it styles.css, and make sure you put the .css so it's indicated as a CSS file, and it's recognized by GourmIDE as a CSS file, and hit OK. And there it is. It's saying code goes here. Now we can use comments in here, and I'll show you what the comments are. They're different than the HTML comments, which I don't even know if we talked about yet. But there's comments in there, so if you need to put little breaks or little notes or anything in there, you could do that. But here's styles.css, and it's open right now. So we have our index styles.css, and we want to link this one to the styles. And the way we're going to do that is go in the head element, not the header. Remember, header is for structure. Head is part of the elements like meta and title and what we're going to do right now. Now I'm going to put it after the meta so that title's the last one, and I'm just going to hit return, and I'll use my Emmet shortcut, and I'll just type link and hit tab, and it puts it right in there. Link rel equals style sheet. You could put type equals text/CSS, or you could just leave it the way it is. It should work fine. And it's asking for the link, and we're just going to put in styles.css. And I'm saying to create a file called styles, not style, even they use that there. So it's styles.css. And you're not going to see anything yet because we have nothing in styles.css, but let me save the index page, and we shouldn't have to do much else with the index page because the index page is just going to be looking to the styles. All the content and structure in here should be the same, so we shouldn't have to do anything else with this. So I'm going to go to styles. However, when we look at it, we'll be looking at the index page, and we're going to have to refresh it. So let's put our first style in here. We'll do the width and just take care of that. I'm going to put section. This is the selector. So we're selecting all the section elements. And then I'm going to put a left curly brace. And when you put a left one, it should make a right one. And then hit enter so that the second one goes down on a line, and it gives you some space in between to do your CSS declaration. We'll talk about declarations and how they work, but basically you're going to have property, colon, and then a value, and then a semicolon. That's the way it's going to work. So if you want to put width, that's the property, then a colon, and then the value is 800, and you have to put the unit. I'll put px, and don't put a space. You could put it right together and put a semicolon. And you do have to finish it off. Sometimes it'll work if you don't put the semicolon, but that indicates that it ends, so that if you have something after that and you never ended it with the semicolon, it creates a problem. So this is the declaration block, and this is one declaration in here, or style. We call them styles, and there's a property and value. So it's going to look for the section element, and it's going to make the width 800 pixels. And it's not saved, so let me save it, and I'll go here and I'll refresh. And there it is. So it did the same thing we did the first time, although now it did it through another page. And let's just throw some color in there. Let's get it looking different. So let's put a color for section. I'm going to go in here for section, and I'll put background color. And I'll start typing background, and I'll find background color. And then if you're not sure of a color, I'm just going to go to the color picker, and they have color names. You can go up here to the top, and you could look for names. And I think that's where I start. HTML color names. You could look for the names in here, and look for off whites. I think I used antique white, something like that. Or you could just kind of mix things up rather than scrolling through all of these. But here's some ones that I was working with, these kind of off white ones. And again, I'm not going to use the same exact ones I had. Let's try corn silk. Now you could put in corn silk, or you could just copy this. I'm just going to copy this and use the hex code. And unless you find it easier to know the name when you look at it. So, you could do that. That way you'll know when you look at the code what they're talking about. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to put corn silk, and I'm still going to put a semicolon, and I'm going to save it, and let's see what happens. Best way to find out what's going on with CSS is to try it out. And there it is. And you can see it's only this section part, and it's creating a gap between here because there's default space in regular HTML, and it's not doing anything to the footer. So if you wanted it behind there, I guess you could put the color on the body. Let's try that. Let's go and try that. Instead of putting the background color on section, let's put it on body. And I like to go in order of kind of the outside in, meaning, you know, body is the more outside, and then we're working our way into section and header and footer and things like that. So let's work our way outside in, and that's what we're going to do here. So in our styles, I'm going to put body up here. So I'm going to target the body element. The same way, body space, and then the left curly brace, and it'll make the right one, and hit enter. And I'm just going to paste corn silk, the background color there. I'll take some space out of here. So now I have the width of section, body is background color. I got to keep saving, and I'm just doing Command S on a Mac. You could do Control S on Windows. And now it's making everything that color because everything's part of the body, and that's okay. And now what happens if we made the width of body 800 pixels? Well, let me see what happens here. Now, you can leave that blank. That will not create an error or anything. Let's just see what happens here if that puts only the color on that. And I'm going to save it, which I did, and I'll refresh it. And it didn't change anything. And the reason that happens is because normally the background color of body is white. Now, when we put this color in there, that cascaded, or it kind of took over the white. So it's not going to leave a white behind here because that came from body. But one thing you can do is target HTML and make that another color so that body is a separate color. So let's try that. And I'm going to make that first because that's HTML is outside of everything. So I'm going to put HTML, my curly braces, and I'm going to pick a little bit darker color. So I used corn silk, and I'm going to use Navajo white. And again, you could use the hex code if you want. And I'll paste it. Now, I just pasted a color name. I have to put background color, I have to put the colon, I have to put all that kind of stuff. But at least I have it there. And notice you don't have to put spaces in there. It's not a big deal with the space. And if you're using color names, you don't put pound signs. That's only with hex. So let's see what happens with this. I'll save it. I'll refresh it. And now we see what's happening here. The HTML is a darker color. This is a lighter color. So it's kind of looking like where we want to go. That way, if we want to make the footer a different color, we can do that. Now, one thing I'm going to try here, and to wipe out this space here and to wipe out some other space. Now, this is going to wipe out everything. But let's just see what happens, and we'll kind of work from there. I'm going to go to our online book here. And I think it's actually in lesson 1, and I said to kind of avoid this stuff because we're not digging into it yet. But if we scroll down to where they have CSS Resets, I think it's in this chapter, it's down near the bottom, all the way. There's all these resets, and it even has like a kind of a, you know, you're giving credit to it right here. And I'm going to try this out. Now, I'm not going to use the reset for older browsers right now because I just don't want that much code. You're learning CSS for the first time. I don't want to be throwing all this in here. I just want to reset all these things here. Now, just keep in mind that you can target a whole bunch of selectors at once, or a whole bunch of elements at one time, just by putting commas in between. And then they all get these properties down here. And notice there's a list of properties, and they're all separated by semicolons. So I'm going to copy all this, even the comment up here, just so I have it. And I'm going to go all the way down to here. And I'm not going to use this one for older browsers. I'll just skip that for now. And I'll go back here. Now I'm going to put this in front of everything. I'll put a couple spaces, and I'll put this reset at the top. And again, these things are comments. It goes / asterisk and then */ and that you could put text in a comment. And I'm going to do that down here. I'm actually going to put another comment and do / asterisk and put reset ends here, start my CSS. Now everything right now is becoming gray because I didn't end the comment. So I have to end the comment by doing */ kind of like bookends. So the slashes stay on the outside, the asterisks are on the inside. So I'm not really going to do anything with that, but I am going to see what happens because it's resetting a lot of different stuff. We may not want to reset our font size and some other things in here. So let's see what happens. We'll save it, and let's see what the reset does. Whoa, reset wipes out everything. It wipes out our H1 styles, meaning it wipes them out from being bold and being larger and any spacing. Now that's okay, but it even took away all our bullets and things like that. Actually, I think some of the bullets are actually moving off the page. I think they're kind of cut off. So we'll be able to fix that. But let's just adjust font size. I'm going to get rid of this. Now, you don't even have to get rid of stuff. If you want to just hide something, you could put / asterisk and in there too. So I'm just kind of commenting out those two lines there. I could have done them one at a time, but I just wrapped the comment around both of them, or I could have just deleted them. So now at least we have our larger headings here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start adding some space in here. And one thing I'm going to do is add space kind of around the inside of here, not around the header, because I like the header going to the edge, and we're going to probably center it. But I don't want stuff in here going to the edge there. So I think what I'm going to do for now, just to see what happens, is I'm going to put something called padding. Now padding is inside the space. Margin is outside the space. Padding is inside. So I'm going to put it inside the space, and I'm going to put it on body and see what happens. So we're going to put some padding on body. So now I'm going to move down here, and where it has width, I'm going to put padding. When we type in padding, you can see you could do left, right, top, or if you just do padding, that's on all sides. So I'm going to do padding on all sides, and I'm going to just put 24 pixels for now and just see how it works. Just see what happens. We're just kind of trying things out. And now you can see it move things off a little bit. You can see now it's kind of pushing things in a little bit. It's not pushing out, it's pushing in, but I don't like the header being like that, and I don't know if I want the footer being like that. So what I could do is say, I don't want the padding on body, on all of body, I just want it on section. So let me just put it on section right now, and I'll get rid of some extra space there, even though it's not a problem. So these are our custom styles that we're working on here, our custom declarations, just some color, some width, we got some padding in there. I'll save it, refresh it, and now our picture, our image has moved back, and now you can see we have padding around here. Now there's some odd things happening with our bullet list. Things are crunched together, so we're going to have to put a little bit more space in there. We don't have space after and space before, but we have something called, we could use padding again. We could use padding on paragraphs and say padding so many pixels top, padding bottom. We could do things like that. So I might do that with the H2s to create some space in there. And one thing I could also do too is move these bullets over, and I'll talk about doing that, but let's put some space in these H2s. So I could tackle the H2s. Now I'm going to move down here because that's after all this stuff, so I'm going to tackle H2 and do my curly braces. And what I'll do with H2, I'll just do padding top, and I'm just going to try 12 pixels for now and just see what that looks like. Again, it's not exactly what I did the first time. Let me refresh it, and that's okay. I could maybe do a little more, but that looks okay. That was 12. I could maybe, do 24. Is that too much? That's okay. But we're going to make our heading a little bit bigger, our first heading, our H1, and these don't have to be quite as big, but we have to move these things in too. Now, we know this is 24 pixels in, but these have kind of like a negative distance here. So what I'm going to do is target the unordered list and the ordered list, which is the bullet and the numbered list, and move them in by using I could use padding or I could use margin. And let's try margin first. I don't even remember what I did the first time. I think I used a margin left, so let me try that. And now I'm going to go down here and target OL, and if I want to target both of them, I'll target OL, comma, UL. That's the ordered list and the unordered list, and do it the same way. So now I'm targeting two selectors, and I'm just going to put margin left. If I do 24, let's just see if I did 24 pixels, what happens. Save it, refresh it. They get moved in a little bit, so there's still a little offset. So if I want them even, I think I kind of subtract 6 from it. So if I had 24 minus 6, I could do it like 18. I think that's the way it would work, but we don't have to get into that, all those details right now. But I'm going to put it at 18, and that should line them up. And you'd have to look up what all the defaults are, but now that lines it up pretty good. Although you might want them indented more, but I'm kind of keeping them right on top right now. So that looks okay. Now, we also mentioned about centering this thing, and I'll do that because that's pretty easy, and then we'll take a break so this doesn't get too long. So what I'm going to do to center this thing, I could actually go into body, and you have to have a width. This is a little trick here. If you have to have a width, because you're going to do something called margin auto, which basically puts the even amount, it puts an even amount of space on either side, an even amount of margin on either side of body. But you have to have a width because it needs to know how to balance it off. So if I put width 800px, and I do something called margin, and I just do auto. That means it's going to put an auto amount on either side, an even amount. It's actually going to center all our body. And let's make sure that it does. And there it centers. And that way, if you move your screen around, it's centering in the middle. So we're getting there. We're going to adjust some spacing. We're going to adjust the fonts. We're going to adjust the footer at the bottom. And what I'll do is I'll do that in part 2.